You are listening to the Prepared Warrior Podcast, where law enforcement and military trainers discuss cutting-edge training, tactics, and technology. Here is your host, John Wilson.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 9 of the Prepared Warrior. I'm John Wilson. Our guest for this episode is Arno Lippassaar. I like to start every episode with a quote. This one is from John Steinbeck, who said, "The sword is more important than the shield, and skill is more important than either. The final weapon is the brain. All else is supplemental." I'd like to welcome our guest onto the program, Arno Lippassaar. He's a recently retired trooper from the New York State Police, with his most recent assignment being the New York State Police Academy as an Academy Training Officer. He had been a trooper for over 23 years. He was an instructor assigned to numerous subjects, mostly related to firearms, active shooter, and reality-based areas of training. He was certified a master instructor by the Municipal Police Training Council in June of 2017 and has actively trained other troopers to become instructors as well. Starting in 2003, he taught firearms as a range instructor. He was a road trooper for 18 years, assigned to all aspects of police work, including crime investigation, contaminated crime scene, emergency response team, and traffic enforcement. Arno is also the only trooper in the history of the state of New York State Police to be a two-time Brummer Award recipient, their highest award for heroism. And he is currently the Director of Sales and Marketing for Smart Firearms. Thank you so much for coming on, Arno.
I appreciate you having me.
Now, I guess first, let's get a little background on you. What was it that first got you interested in policing?
To be honest, ever since the days of watching Chips on TV, I was a young kid, and I'd watch, of course, everything Dukes of Hazzard and things. But when Chips came on, I don't know, something called to me about the patrolling, looking for trouble, teamwork, protecting people, and I just always ended up deciding to angle my life towards law enforcement.
Now, when you first started, was it a little different than the TV show, or?
It definitely was. So, TV leaves a good taste when it's on TV, but in real life, obviously, you learn real quick that what happens in real life is a lot. It's different. It's scarier some days. It's nastier. You learn people aren't as good as you wish they were. It never always has a happy ending at the end. So, I got a wake-up call pretty quickly over the years.
Now, you were a New York State trooper. What were some of the significant challenges that were specific to that area of the world? Well,
and the New York State Police is kind of a unique agency because everyone thinks of New York as New York City.
Right.
And New York City is a very small area of New York State. New York State Police really provides police service to areas that maybe don't have their own police service. So I was mostly a rural trooper. I worked a lot of farmlands. I had multiple towns, so there was only anywhere between 2 and 4 of us on a shift, covering anywhere from 8 to 12 towns. And so when there was only 2 of you working all those towns, you really had to rely on yourself. Unlike different areas of the country where your backup is 30 seconds away, my backup was maybe 20 minutes away. So you had to learn to... I learned to talk more than I did to act. I learned to be able to make friends with people, to have them respect you and talk to people longer. You could actually get a lot more action that you wanted instead of what you see on TV and sometimes even in the bigger cities. When you have 12 guys backing you up, then you have a lot of bravery. But when you're by yourself and you have 3 or 4 guys that you're trying to handle, you have to use your brains more than your brawn.
So you mean, I guess you have to talk your way out of a situation. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. And that's not something that was taught when I went through the academy. We did a lot of book work, we did a lot of classroom work, a lot of tests, but the actual practice in learning how to talk to people, and that just wasn't taught when I went through the academy.
Is that something that is taught more now, as far as the social aspect, where people might not realize that so much of it is based on interactions and and trying to understand what's going on, understand other people?
It is. Our agency specifically went with an adult-based learning program years in after I had already moved on and onto the road. So instead of just classroom, they do some classroom, and then they do practical, more reality-based training to do fake scenarios and different things. And, some of the early scenarios are very, very simple. And a lot of times it is just talking to somebody, getting to learn how to ask questions, because a lot of the different generations now haven't had a lot of personal communications. They do with text messaging and social media, but I always tell my recruits at the academy, the best recruits right now when they come in the door are bartenders and school teachers. If they had to talk in front of the public or with the public, they're usually very good communicators and can, especially bartenders, they can talk themselves out of trouble pretty easily.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting aspect of new police. Is people being used to communicate by writing things out or text messages or instant messaging, but you can't do that as a police officer most of the time, right?
No. Yeah. I mean, because besides just what they're saying to you, which, social media and texting is fine, you know what they're saying, but you don't know the context, you don't know their emotional state, you don't know any sort of indicators or cues. So when you're actually physically talking to somebody, you're doing more than just saying words to them. You're observing, you're reacting to different things that they say and how they say them, not just what they say.
Yeah, so definitely learning social cues might be something people are a little behind on these days, eh?
I think so. I do.
So how did you transition into getting involved with training and firearms training?
I had about 8 years patrol work, and a good friend of mine, he was a firearms instructor, but he was advancing. He was moving on to become an investigator, and he recommended me for the position. I didn't want to do it at the time. My whole life, all I wanted to be was a road trooper and fight crime, and I thought, that's stuff for guys that don't want to be on the road. And but he convinced me into it, and I'll tell you, it was the best move I ever made. I went to teach at the academy, and I saw a lot of flustered, scared people that never handled a gun before, didn't know how to shoot. I was able to teach them how to shoot. I was teaching them confidence, and to see how they advanced over the 3 weeks of firearms training from beginning to end, I realized that I found a lot of self-satisfaction in that type of work. So, not that I did it full time, but I looked forward to my 2 or 3 weeks at the academy every 6 months or so that I'd go to teach.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like you learned a lot doing that?
I did. Because what you learn in the academy, you're always under stress, but when you become an instructor, you get to learn from other instructors as they're teaching, but you're not under stress to learn. You've already, quote unquote, learned it at some point, but now you're refining what you've learned. So, and from there, teaching firearms, I ended up eventually becoming a academic instructor also, and which I'd never done before, and I didn't know if I was qualified for, but you learn from previous instructors, and then you try to master your art, and then you pass on your knowledge to the next instructors. So it was a pretty nice career and that's the way I ended my career at the state police, was finishing up at the academy and trying to pass my knowledge on to somebody else.
So what specifically, as an academic instructor, is that still police related, or is that general knowledge?
It is. It's police related. So I taught a lot of the firearms sections of law. New York State especially is a very let's say restricted state as far as firearms laws go. So the laws were changing very quickly, and so because of those quick changes, the academics had to be changed quickly as far as to keep up with the law. So the fresh batch of troopers going on the road knew what was illegal, what wasn't illegal, and what they could do, what they couldn't do. And so I found that to be very challenging, besides, teaching the regular firearms and active shooter training that I did, and other types of reality-based training. But then to get actually into the books, I didn't think I'd enjoy that. But that's where a lot of them were also struggling, was just because they were professional college students, some of them. Some of them had a master's degree, but it was in something that was totally different, because with what we taught them, we taught them the law, but then they had to actually perform that law in a scenario, as far as knowing what charges to bring up, what was illegal, what wasn't. So, they didn't always get tested on paper. They got tested in practical exercises too.
Okay, so I was thinking it was a very, book heavy, not glamorous type of way of learning, but you still have to put it into the physical practice, and then I guess after the scenario you go over what the actual charges are and what was
Correct.
legal and what was illegal.
Correct, yeah. They have to know what the charges were. They have to know if something is illegal, what the process is, like if we were teaching them about search warrants, when they could enter a house or when they couldn't enter a house. So there was a lot of things they had to learn, but it wasn't all book work. It was maybe 2 or 3 days of good, strong book work and theory, and then usually 2 days of practical exercises.
So as someone who has given firearms training for years, how would you say the training has changed or evolved? And I guess also the laws have changed too, right?
They have. The way firearms training has progressed, I think, is fantastic. From what I've seen, from where I go a lot, when we trained, I hate to say it, but it was almost like they were training us to be Olympic shooters. Get your perfect breathing stance, grip, sight alignment, trigger control, gently squeeze the trigger. Mm-hmm. And that still comes into play in the beginning when you're first getting used to a firearm. But at some point, we have to teach more combat firearms and survival. And I found that our program, what we do there now, is greatly advanced. Now it's all about getting that pistol drawn out, getting on target, shooting, and not necessarily worrying about getting perfect dead center, in your 10 ring, but let's get it on target and stop the threat. So I find it's really progressing to what it should be now.
So is that something you wish when you were, I guess, first a trooper had been done differently, or is there anything that you would wish you had known when you had first started?
I was lucky. I did not know what to expect when I went to the academy, except from watching maybe like Police Academy, which, trust me, there's nothing even similar to Police Academy movie. Although it's the funniest movie, everyone should watch it. Oh, yeah. But, I was lucky when I went on the road that I was assigned to 2 very effective and very good instructors, very thorough. So what I didn't learn in the academy, I learned very quickly under their tutelage. And then, the station that I worked at was a very busy station. We were a very active station. We were on the Canadian border, where it's a lot of smuggling that goes on there. So we were thrust right into a lot of dangerous situations quickly. So, I was corrected very quickly on many things that I had done wrong. I wish I would have known, that then. I maybe could have taken some more courses on my own. But now I do feel that troopers coming out on the road today, I think with their firearms and their reality-based active shooter training, I think, my gosh, they're light years ahead of where I was when I walked out of that academy.
What do you see as some of the most important elements of reality-based training that people do today?
I think that it's very important to see how somebody acts under stress. And, some people, a written test is stress, and that's fine. So we have standards. If they pass, they pass. If they fail, they fail. If that's their stress and they can't handle that stress, that's great. But with reality-based training, we also need to know how they act under stress. So by getting them into a situation, if we can create it to the point where it's stressing them enough, and we usually can do that pretty simply with a little bit of planning. I've seen meltdowns. I've seen people that after a scenario have decided that this really isn't the career for them. And to me, it's so important to see that in the academy, in a training environment, before we get them on the road with real people, with real weapons, with real grudges, with real things that can go bad. The public can get hurt. I think it's just important to do that at the academy level first before we put them into a real environment. Not to say that we're going to weed out everybody that needs to be, but at least we're giving them a fair chance to come to that self-realization too, that maybe this isn't the career for them, or maybe it is. I've seen some struggle with book work, but then put them in a reality-based environment where they have to apply their knowledge, and they're rock stars. They're the best. So sometimes it's a confidence boost that they need also. So it goes both ways.
For sure, yeah. I could see someone just having the opportunity to put something into practice might be what gives them the confidence.
Right, and we all learn differently. Some people can read something and understand it immediately. Me, I learn from my mistakes. I've been through the stress vest instructor course.
Oh, yeah.
I was probably shocked a good 100 times that week between the shock knife and the stress vest. And I have to say, it's a humbling experience, but you do learn. I learned that way. I learned that I didn't want to get shot. And so, I learned how to do things a little bit better. And, I've been a trooper for 23 years, but I don't care how good you are, you can always learn something every single time you do some sort of training. So you don't know how you're going to act until you're there. And if we can recreate that, fantastic. Fantastic.
You mentioned some specific things, but what are some specific elements of reality-based training like that you see heighten stress the most, or kind of might make that person decide one way or the other whether it's for them?
I see a lot of people when they can't come up with different options. I don't like situations where there's only one solution, because in real life, if you and I were to go through something, we're going to handle it differently. We're going to probably come to the same outcome, but maybe you'll see one way to do something where I'll see a different way to do something. And as long as we do it safely and we do it within the rules, then that's a wonderful thing. That's what makes everybody individuals. So, I'm 6 foot tall. If I go into a situation and I need to use my height and my size and my voice to control the situation, that's fantastic. But if I see a smaller, younger person who maybe doesn't have the size to their advantage or the dominance that they might physically need in a situation, but maybe they can sweet talk somebody and shuck and jive with them a little bit, or talk about sports and find something else that's involved. And, as role players, that's important for us to see different techniques also that our students are using to get to the finish line of successfully completing the scenario, whether it is to de-escalate it, to arrest somebody. So that's where I find with reality-based training is 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. It does, but we might just have to subtract 2, add 3, + 1, and we get there eventually. But that's where I've really liked reality-based training, is there's multiple solutions to one answer.
Do you think that's a good space for people to kind of figure out what their strengths might be in a certain situation?
Absolutely. It's they need that. If they haven't been there, then they're not even sure about themselves. A lot of people, when they start a career in police work, they've never done police work before. It's sure we get some transplants from other agencies, but a lot of times they're straight out of college or doing some side job until they can get into one of our academies. So to actually be able to see that they can do it, and then to for some seasoned officers to say, hey, good job, I liked how you did that. I think they need that, because if you're just yelling at them all the time and scolding them for things, then you're not building them up. That might happen at the beginning of the academy, but when they start doing things right, then they have to be recognized for that, because you need that confidence on the road.
Now, active shooter training is becoming more of a focus, with it just being more prevalent in the world. What should trainers know when conducting this type of training?
More training is better. I mean, I know that training takes up a lot of time from people off on the road, but we all have children. We all go to public places. Our family is out there. And to me, we have to be prepared. It's unfortunate. I wish we never had an active shooter situation ever again in this world, but the fact is it's going to happen. So a lot of these smaller agencies and bigger agencies have learned that it can happen at any time. So why not get everybody on the same page and let's get some good training going. Let's work together with different agencies, and I just want them to get more time to do that, because it really is it's not quite like driving. Driving, we do it every day. We get in the car, we put in the drive, we turn the wheel and hit the gas and go. But with active shooter training, I guess my most humbling experience, I'll tell you, and I went to go play paintball once with a bunch of college kids. And here I am, the big bad trooper, thinking, I'm U.S. Army prior. Now I'm trooper. I'm gonna wipe the woods with these kids. No problem. They're all college kids. No problem. I got taken out the first 5 rounds of paintball. I was one of the first ones taken out each and every time because I hadn't done it in a long time. And then I all of a sudden, okay, slow down here, speed up here. All right, get a better sight picture, get better shot, stop spray and pray. By the end of the day, I was doing really, really well. I won't say I was the best, but I wasn't getting taken out in the first 5 seconds either. So, and it's the same in real life. I think that the more practice we get, the better we are preparing everybody. And we're finding not only just that, who's good leaders and who aren't, but, is our equipment up to par? Is our communications up to par? I mean, one of the things our agency learned was our portable radios suck in most buildings with brick and, cement, cinder block walls. And, they started upgrading some of their communication systems with repeaters in the cars and things like that. But they wouldn't have known that if they wouldn't have run these exercises in all different types of locations and, practice what they preach. So I think that's important.
So it's not just what to do in that situation, but also are we not going to have some kind of communication failure, or can we actually do what we were planning to do? You don't know that until you practice it at least a few times. Exactly.
And I also think it's important to practice in places where we think we might actually have to respond to someday. If you have a big mall in your town and they're closed one day, what a better place, because that might be the one place where you might have a situation. I love training areas, but a lot of times our buildings were abandoned old buildings that somebody let us use before they tore them down. And, and any training is better than no training, but it still has to be as realistic as possible. But I like getting into the realistic environments of where we might actually have to respond. That's why I think it's important to train in the schools where we may have to respond to, the malls, things like that.
For active shooter training, is there a solid, course or way to do the training, or do you think it's still in its development stage?
I think there's a lot of great ideas that are coming out. I think they're still being developed. I know that different agencies have done the alert training. I haven't been through that. I know New York State has a Homeland Security Training Center in Oriskany, New York, where they do a lot of training for all the New York State police agencies. I'm sorry, not New York State police, but New York State agencies. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to get on the same page. But then you go to other states, and I talk to people in other states, and they're in the infancy stage still, or they're way, way advanced, because maybe they had a strong military background in their upper echelon, where they brought something different into training that maybe another agency didn't have because they didn't have that experience. And some of it doesn't always work in civilian, from military to civilian, civilian to military. So I still think we're still pretty new in this type of training. Mm-hmm. In general.
Now, I want to ask you about something, I read in your bio, you've won, twice won an award for heroism, known as the Brummer Award. Would you be able to tell us a bit about this, so what this award is for, and I guess maybe what happened on one of those incidents?
Sure. It's the highest award that the New York State Police gives for heroism. It's chosen by a civilian panel along with one officer. I was very blessed to be the recipient of that award twice in my career, both early on. One was within my first year and a half of being on the road, and the second one was about 3 years after that. And and I want to say I appreciate being recognized, and I'm honored, but people do things every single day, which probably now have put mine to shame from what the level is now. The world has changed a lot. But no, one of the ones was a subject had gotten into a fight with his girlfriend, had beat her up pretty bad. I went to arrest him along with a local police officer there. And as we were going to arrest him, he lit the house on fire that he was in. Wow. And ran back inside. I was a volunteer fireman also at the time, so the fire department happened to be very close by. I suited up with a air pack and respirator and bunker gear and led the firemen in. And I found him on the second floor of the house. He had stopped breathing and was succumbed by the smoke there. We brought him outside, and the rescue squad showed up and was able to resuscitate him. And he survived, so to be arrested. But it was still. It was something that we don't normally suit up in fireman's gear and go into burning buildings after our suspects, but, it had to be done. And the second incident was a woman that had lost control of her car on a sandy curve in November and driven into the Salmon River, which is in upstate New York, and she went underwater. Another trooper and I pulled up at about the same time, and we both dove in and tried to save her. Unfortunately, the water was about 37 degrees. We made many, many attempts, but it just got to the point we couldn't do it anymore. The hypothermia was setting in, and we had a retired scuba diver from the state police actually contacted down the road, and he came with his scuba gear and ended up able to get her out. But unfortunately, she had passed away by that point. So we unfortunately did not save her on that one, but they recognized that the attempt was what they were impressed with, so they awarded us both the Brummer Award for that also.
Right, and it seems like those are both incidences where wouldn't necessarily be recommended, or people wouldn't know to do what you guys did in that situation. Is that kind of the idea behind being recognized there? It
is. It's above and beyond the call of duty they look for. We recently had a trooper who there was a child caught on a dam. He had walked out there at some point and froze, and the water was rushing really bad through this dam, and this trooper walked out on that ledge also and was able to hold that child there until the fire department was able to come and help rescue him. And that's not something we get trained to do, and so I think in that situation again, it was something that is not in the normal course of duty. It's something that they don't give us a playbook on everything that we have to do. Sometimes you just have to figure it out and do something.
Yeah, it's such a unscripted day at work, right? Anything can be as slow or as crazy. I'm sure there are times where you're in a rural area and you're like waiting for someone to drive 10 kilometers or miles over the speed limit, right?
Some days I probably should have been arrested for grand larceny because I didn't do much of anything some days. But like I always said, we don't get paid for what we do. We get paid for what we might have to do. And some days you go in and you want nothing more than to have a quiet day, have a cup of coffee, and maybe write a couple tickets. But and then all hell breaks loose, and you finish your day maybe 4 or 5 hours after your shift and get home and you're like, what the heck just happened today? So it's that's what I liked about the job, was you never knew what you were going to do each and every day.
Now, I was wondering if you could tell us about kind of solutions you were coming up with reality-based training. At one point, I read you noticed a deficiency with kind of the red guns you were using, and you kind of came up with a different solution for the RBT training. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we'd always had an issue with red gun, or at least I had an issue with red gun training when I got to the academy, and all the instructors agreed. It was one of those things where the red guns are great for working the mats and working weapon retention and different things like that, but the problem is they don't have an active trigger. And without an active trigger, you have to tell your students to say bang bang and put their fingers on the trigger. And if you think about it, that's like us when we were 10 or 12 years old. Bang, bang, you're dead, brush your teeth and go to bed type of thing. And I just found that to be just creating training scars. I'd watch recruits make the choice to have to shoot somebody, say bang, bang, but never put their finger on the trigger. Or get scared somebody was hiding behind the door, slam their finger on the trigger, but not say bang, bang, and then argue that they didn't shoot because they didn't say bang, bang. It flustered me greatly to the point where I looked for a solution to that issue. We started with some airsoft guns at the Academy first, but they just weren't working out. They weren't durable enough to survive through multiple draws and holstering and getting thrown around during scenarios. So I ended up finding a gun called Smart Firearm training device. It's a company out of Tempe, Arizona, and Mike Farrell from the company actually flew over to the State Police Academy to show us some of his guns, and I'll tell you, I was thoroughly impressed. Training gun, it has an active trigger. It makes a gunshot noise when you shoot it. No projectiles, 100% safe. Holsters into the holsters perfectly. And it had actually a really unique feature. It had a trigger intrusion alarm. So if you put your finger on the trigger but you didn't shoot, an alarm goes off and tells you to basically take your finger off the trigger. So it was, not only was it a great scenario gun, but it was a great gun to teach the fundamentals, keeping your finger indexed until you're ready to fire. So I was sold on them pretty quickly. I ended up helping the state police write up some paperwork. We ended up, we were hoping to buy 10 for the state police. We ended up buying 200 by the time we were done.
Oh, wow.
They actually deployed them throughout the state for active shooter training throughout the state, plus the academy itself. They use it in all scenarios, and defensive tactics, taser training, everything, because we needed something that was a dry fire, safe solution, but also gave us that immediate feedback. And that gun ended up working out to be one of the best things ever. Actually, they're looking at purchasing more pretty soon, I believe. So it's they really believe in it. We're with Smart Firearms now with over 100 agencies, I think, around the country.
So then you became involved with Smart
I
Firearms.
did.
Yeah.
I did. It wasn't planned.
Yeah.
But when I retired, I was the liaison for those guns at the academy, and I texted the CEO and let him know, here's your new contact, and I'm going to be retiring pretty soon. And he called me a half an hour later and offered me a job as his director of sales and marketing, which I gladly accepted. It's nice being able to help sell a product that I truly believe in. I really think it's the next generation of training gun for academies everywhere. And, I travel a lot now throughout the country showing these, and I don't get negative feedback. They love the gun. They see the need. Anybody that's involved in training and has ever said bang, bang before,
right,
as soon as I mention it, they all nod their head. They're like, yep, I hate doing that. And so it's been a really good relationship. It's a great company. And then through them, I got to know everybody at Setcan. So
yeah, it's great. You make a lot of connections, but you're still involved in law enforcement kind of community. I guess that after being retired, right? You're still connected. And
I do, and that's the one thing everybody said I'd miss is the people. And the best part is I get to still see all the people. I still visit the State Police Academy in New York. I was just in New Mexico State Police Academy the other day. I was down in Texas for the training conference there in Corpus Christi. I was at the IACP show in Florida, so I'm actually expanding my base now. I get to meet police officers from different agencies, different states, and I've been through, my gosh, at least 50 academies throughout the country in the last few months, and I really have gotten the gamut of seeing, different agencies and what they're doing with training, and with the some have very limited budgets, some have very big budgets, and
right,
but it's always neat to see even the small agencies can do a lot with a small budget if they have the right people that are trying to make a difference. So it's really nice to see that.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the program, Arno. Is there any other tidbit of advice you'd give to trainers or even new recruits? Especially since you're seeing so many different types of training and people throughout your career?
take advantage of any training you can get. To me, training is so much fun, and some people see it as a task, and they really should see it as an opportunity. If especially take care of your family, so be the best person that you can be on the road, and take advantage of that training. Have fun with it, because if you don't have fun with it, if you look at it as just a task that you have to do monthly or every 3 or 4 months, whatever they require you to do, if you're looking at it as a negative, then you're going to get negative training out of it. But if you're looking at it as a positive, a day off the road where you get to learn something and have fun and learn something, then you're going to walk away that much better for it. So that's all I can say is and then pass your knowledge. Don't retire and not pass your knowledge on to somebody else. You're doing yourself a disservice, because my favorite line to my recruits is the only thing you have at the end of your life is your name, so make it a good one. Everyone should talk good things about you when you leave. Mm-hmm. I don't care about a big funeral, but I just want people to know that I tried my best when I was doing what I did. So
all right, well, thank you for passing your knowledge then.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity here.
This has been the Prepared Warrior Podcast. For more info on our guests or other episodes, check out thepreparedwarrior.com. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for the Prepared Warrior Podcast, email jon@thepreparedwarrior.com.